Water doesn't announce its betrayal with a roar. It whispers. It seeps, a cold kiss on packed earth where turnips slept through winter. Then the squelch underfoot where dryness once reigned. The plink 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 from corners never wet before. This was the first language of the drowning, not a flood, but a creeping, an insidious wetness rising from below, as if the very bones of the earth were weeping. Clothyard felt it before she saw it, that unnatural chill crawling up her ankles as she descended into the cellar. Her breath fogged an air that shouldn't be this cold in July. And there, her winter store, bobbing like pale, dead fish in the sudden, dark pool. Turnips meant for stews, for thinning broth when snow lay deep. Now adrift in water that smelled not of earth, but of the grave, cold, metallic wrong. This wasn't rain. This was invasion. Then the well betrayed them. Clear, cold water drawn. 4 generations turned thick and brown overnight. Mud, not the clean scent of turned soil after spring rain, but the stench of disturbed depths of graves opened. Clothed knelt in her vegetable plot, not to tend, but to claw. Her fingers, hard as knotted oak from decades of labor, dug into the earth. But the earth wasn't earth anymore. It was sludge, thick, sucking, cold as a serpent's belly. Her prized cabbages, nurtured since seedling, their leaves wide and proud, destined for the Michaelmas feast table, a testament to her skill, her pride. They drifted now, uprooted, unmoored, islands of green in a spreading sea of brown. The rich, loamy scent of her garden, the smell of life and growth, surrendered utterly to the dank, fungal smell of decay. The smell of endings. Children's laughter, usually a bright thread weaving through the village air as they chased their kickball down the path, fell silent. The path wasn't a path anymore. It was a stream. A new, unwanted river cutting through their world. Men waded now, knee-deep in the chill invader, their boots vanishing into the murk. They heaved sandbags, rough hemp sacks, bulging with the very earth being stolen from beneath them. They stacked them, a low, desperate wall against the rising tide. But the sandbags wept. Constant tears of muddy water streaked their rough surfaces, like mourners at a funeral that hadn't yet ended. What hope resided in a wall that wept? Faces etched with the lines of sun and labor now showed something else. Dawning, chilling comprehension. This wasn't a misfortune. This wasn't nature. This water had purpose, direction. It came not from the sky, but from the dam up the valley, the Lord's dam. It flowed with the weight of deliberate intent. The men didn't speak much. Lee, grunt of effort, the wet slap of the bags, the sucking sound of mud releasing a boot, and beneath it all, the terrible, patient gurgle of the rising water. At twilight, Clothed retreated. The water lapped at her threshold, a hungry tongue tasting the packed earth floor. Inside, the familiar smells of wood smoke and drying herbs were overwhelmed by the damp stone smell of the invader. She took the St. Christopher statue from its niche. The wood was smooth under her calloused thumb, worn by generations of anxious touches before journeys. Her husband, Jacques, had carved it the winter their first son was born. She placed it now on the high mantel above the hearth. This hearth, where Jacques had warmed his hands after fishing the icy stream, where she'd birthed 4 children, screaming her defiance into the smoky air while neighbors held her hands, where stew had bubbled, stories were told, and life, hard but theirs, had unfolded. The lop 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 of dark water against those very stones. St. Christopher, patron of travelers, bearer of the Christ child across dangerous waters. His wooden feet were already darkening, absorbing the rising wet. The water climbed, silent, relentless, touched the iron-bound corner of her dowry chest. Inside lay linens woven by her mother, a silver pin from her grandmother, the tiny woolen cap her firstborn war. Things of thread and memory, dissolving in the wet. It swallowed shock fishing nets, still smelling faintly of riverweed and fish scales, relics of a life swept away by fever years before. Now, swept away by water. She didn't pray. What words could hold back this tide? She simply watched. Her history, tangible and irreplaceable, being consumed inch by silent inch. Akata, the water rose to touch the saint's knees. A single candle burned beside the saint. Kata, its light, once a warm promise against the night, now struggled in the thick, wet air. It painted trembling shadows on the encroaching water, on the faces of her drowned memories floating in the chest. Clotilde felt the cold climb her legs inside her own home. It wasn't the sharp cold of winter, but the deep, draining cold of the grave. This water wasn't just taking her home, it was taking her past. Every object submerged was a thread cut in the tapestry of her life. The carved cradle Jacques made, the chipped bowl, her youngest favorite, the nets that fed them, each one a silent scream swallowed by the murk. Outside, the village sounds had changed. The weeping sandbags, the low murmur of men whose strength was ebbing with the light, the frightened whimper of a child carried to higher ground. And beneath it all, the insatiable gurgle of the rising water. It was the sound of time running out, not just for cabbages or cottages, but for a way of life, for generations of stories etched into the very stones now vanishing. The candle flame shivered, not from a draft, but as if pressed upon by the weight of the water, by the sheer impossibility of the loss. The candle flame fought, it burned lower, its light shrinking, concentrating into a fierce, tiny point of defiance. In the gloom, illuminated Clothel's face, not lined with tears, but carved with a profound stillness. It's the stillness of a rabbit sensing the hawk's shadow. It's the stillness of absolute understanding. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't misfortune. It was an execution, delivered not with blade or rope, but with water and mud. The hearthstone where life had begun was now just another stone beneath the rising tide. The water touched the base of the dowry chest. St. Christopher stood knee-deep in the flood, bearing his sacred burden towards an unseen, submerged shore. The candle flame dipped, guttered, then, as a cold swell of water, thick with silt, finally surged over the hearthstone and splashed against the mantle. The flame died, not a fade, sharp, furious hiss, like the last breath sucked from a body. Darkness swallowed the cottage, utter, complete, broken only by the sound. The relentless, patient, triumphant lap-lap-lap of the water, claiming its victory in the absolute dark. The water spoke. It whispered against stone walls. It chuckled in corners. It filled the spaces where breath and prayer and laughter once lived. Clotheled didn't move. She stood in the icy water, a statue herself, feeling the current tug at her skirts. Aside, across the drowned yards and submerged lanes, other lights were going out, pinpricks of defiance extinguished one by one. The village wasn't dying. It was being unmade, erased, and from the direction of the manor, carried on the night air across the newly formed expanse of dark water, came a sound, clean, cold, beautiful, the distant, haunting cry of a swan. Lord Renault's swans, graceful, ghosts gliding over the graveyard of Villeneuve, their calls echoing across the water like a requiem sung by indifferent angels. The sound didn't mourn, it simply was, chilling testament to the silence settling over the drowned homes, the extinguished hearts, the stolen histories. The water had won. And in the suffocating darkness, Clothe understood this was just the beginning of the drowning. Silence is broken here, shattered, obliterated. This wind doesn't whisper promises. It howls like a beast, unchained from the deep Atlantic. It scours the volcanic rock bare, tears at the very air, carries the biting salt sting that seeps into marrow and soul. Look up, not towards the Lord's castle, perched on a safe hill, but two-faced fortress, clawing at the storm-laden sky. Stone fingers, rough-hewn and defiant, grasping at the indifferent clouds. These beehive huts, huddled like frightened sheep against a wolf gale, are Skellig Michael, a sanctuary chosen not for comfort, but for its brutal, purifying edge. Men didn't flee rising water. They sought the precipice. They didn't drown. They chose to hang suspended, 600 feet above the devouring sea. Closer to God, they believed, by being utterly exposed to his creation's raw, unforgiving power. This was the antidote to Villeneuve's silent erasure, not oblivion, but a fierce, trembling confrontation with the void. Ascend with them. Feel the abyss yawn beneath you, cold and hungry. Each step on these wind-polished stairs is an act of defiance, carved in muscle and faith. The stone is cold, eternally damp, treacherously slick underfoot. One misstep, one gust, stronger than conviction, and the sea waits below, patient and roaring. Smell the iron tang of the spray, the sharp ozone bite of the storm, the faint, sour scent of wet wool from a monk's coarse habit, soaked through despite its weave. Listen, beyond the wind's endless shriek, the frantic, accusing cries of nesting gannets. It's a ceaseless avian choir of alarm echoing off the cliffs below. The relentless boom and hiss of waves gnawing at the island's roots, a sound felt in the chest more than heard. This was the path to devotion, not through quiet cloisters scented with incense, but over a threshold of sheer terror. Every single dawn, did their hearts hammer like trapped birds against their ribs? Did the cold sweat of fear mingle with the salt spray on their brows as they climbed, eyes fixed only on the next precarious handhold, never daring to glance down into the maw of the deep? Their faith was not abstract here. It was a physical, trembling thing, forged anew each day in the crucible of this relentless exposure. It was rope and muscle against the void. Inside the stone womb, the roar becomes a deep, resonant thrum, the very air vibrating. The smell is thick, damp stone breathing its ancient chill, the pungent reek of fish oil from the lamp, the dry, almost sweet dust of the vellum, and the underlying, ever-present salt, the scent of tears and the sea. Cold seeps from the walls, a chill that no meager peat fire can truly banish, settling into the bones. Hands, blue-knuckled and trembling slightly, moved by the weak, struggling light. The quill scratches across the treated calfskin. Dominus. Each letter is a battle fought against the dark, against the cold, numbing his fingers, against the distraction of the world's end, howling just beyond the thin stone skin. What inner landscapes sustained Brother Turn? Was it pure, burning devotion, or deeper, more desperate need to impose order, beauty, the immutable word of God, onto this chaotic, threatening canvas? The illuminated capital he paints, a serpentine beast entwined with vibrant knots, begins to take shape under his trembling hand. It's a riot of color against the gloom. Lapis lazuli blue, vermilion red, precious gold leaf painstakingly applied. It feels like an act of rebellion. A shot of defiant beauty hurled into the teeth of the howling gray. They sought God not in ease, but in the deliberate embrace of hardship, believing the sheer physical struggle, the hunger that gnawed, a cold that bit, the ever-present threat of the fall, mirrored the soul's desperate battle against sin. The body's suffering was the ladder to the spirit. Then, the crossing, not water, but air. A yawning gulf where the rock itself seems to have been torn apart by the wind's fury, spanning it. Ropes frayed and bleached white by salt and sun, lashed to uncertain anchors. Wooden slats, worn smooth by generations of fearful feet, slick now with driven spray. Christ's sorrow, they named it, a name heavy with fatalistic hope, a reminder of the agony in the garden. To cross, it was to walk directly into the maw of the storm, the wind tearing at the rough wool habit, trying to pluck the pilgrim from the rock and dash him onto the black teeth below. The bridge bucks and sways like a living thing, groaning under the assault. Every step is an act of surrender, a whispered prayer. Sank Michael, defend, knows, carried away on the gale before it even leaves the lips. Did they close their eyes, trusting blindly? Did they fix their gaze solely on the stone arch ahead, a symbol of heaven's gate, ignoring the sucking void beneath? The rope burns in two, the clutching hand. The heart pounds, a frantic, terrified rhythm against the ribs. This wasn't just a path, it was a gauntlet, run daily. A raw, physical confrontation with oblivion, endured for the promise of a peace that must have felt as distant, as unreachable as the mist-shrouded mainland shore. The discipline here was iron, forged not just in prayer and fasting, but in the constant, grinding resistance to elemental terror. Isolation wasn't just physical distance, okay? It was a wall built of wind and water and vertigo, sealing them off from the world of men, leaving only God and the abyss as companions. The sun bleeds out over the western ocean, staining the churning water crimson and bruised purple. For a fleeting moment, it catches on the wet curve of a beehive roof, transforming it into a fleeting, fiery jewel on the crown of this grim rock. The wind shows no mercy. It still screams its ancient fury around the stones, testing the monks, resolved, testing the very mortar binding their world together. They endure, not through might, but through the sheer, stubborn persistence of their faith. A flickering rush lamp held against the immensity of the dark and the deep. Inside the stone cell, Brother Churin's hand steadies. The final flourish on the illuminated M is complete. The vibrant colors, the deep celestial blue, the blood-red vermilion, the defiant gold glow with an almost unearthly intensity in the surrounding gloom. It is a small, perfect defiance, a testament whispered in pigment, in prayer. They traded the warmth of the valley, the comforting murmur of community, the very solidity of the earth Villeneuve once knew. For this wind-scoured altar, they sought God on the edge of the world and found him, or found only the echoing testament of their own endurance in the wind's endless roar. The answer lies buried with their bones in the thin, stony soil, but the legacy remains, not in submerged timbers, but in words painstakingly copied in the flickering dark, in the defiant geometry of stone built against the void. They vanished not beneath water, but into the consuming mists of time and legend, leaving behind only these silent, stoic stones and the relentless, questioning cry of the gulls. Iron sings here, not hymns, but dirges. The clankling clang of hammers on glowing steel is Constantinople's new heartbeat, frantic, fevered, driving out the silence of prayer. Smoke stings the eyes, thick with the smell of scorched metal, charcoal, and the sour tang of fierce wet. Young Leo, barely 14, feeds a length of scrap metal, a broken church railing, perhaps, or a merchant sign into the forge. The heat blisters his cheeks. He watches the iron blush red, then white. Remembering the cool stillness of Hagia Sophia just days ago, the scent of incense and beeswax. Now, the air tastes of ash and desperation. His fingers brush the small, painted icon at his waist, the Virgin's face serene amidst the grime. Theotokos, save us. The plea is silent, swallowed by the hammer's roar. Outside, the monstrous walls, scarred by centuries, stand sentinel. But beyond them, in the ink-black night, countless Ottoman campfires glitter like malevolent stars. Not water this time, but fire. And men dot the world cracks, not with a scream, but with the roar that tears the dawn apart. A sound felt in the teeth, in the bones, a fist of compressed air slamming into the chest. Basilica speaks. A gout of flame vomits from its iron throat. stone, the weight of a horse cart, hurtles through the air, impossibly slow, then terrifyingly fast. It strikes the ancient wall near the gate of St. Romanus. The impact isn't sound, it's convulsion. Dust explodes outward in a choking gray cloud. Stone shrieks as it shears, fractures, cascades downward in an avalanche of shattered history. On the battlements, men are thrown like rag dolls. Its taste is immediate, acrid gunpowder smoke, sharp and sulfurous, clawing at the throat, mixing with the older scent of dust and cold sweat. The silence that follows is deafening, broken only by a single, ragged cry. Breach. The word hangs in the smoke-choked air, heavy with doom. Constantinople's thousand-year heart shudders. Time becomes the space between impacts. The thunder of the great guns is a maddening drumbeat, shaking the soul. Stones rain down, not just from bombards now, but from catapults, mangonels, a relentless, grinding hail. The air is a fog of pulverized limestone, tasting chalky and bitter, laced with the stench of fear and the metallic taints of blood from wounds hastily bound. On the trembling ramparts, men move like ghosts in the flickering torchlight. They patch the gashes in their city's skin with whatever comes to hand. Splintered beams from collapsed houses, shattered marble columns, the bodies of the fallen wrapped hastily in cloaks. There is no rest, only to watch the frantic repair, the endless scan of the firelit darkness below for the sign of the final wave. Voices are hoarse shouts, swallowed by the din. Prayers are muttered, not to icons, but to the stones themselves. Hold, just hold. Down in the cellars, in the vast cisterns echoing with the dripping water, women and children huddle. The sound here is different. The low drone of the akathist hymn, stifled sobs, the rasp of a wet stone on a kitchen knife. They feel the impacts above, like blows on a coffin lid. The city is a body under siege, bleeding dust, its spirit fraying with every earth-shattering crash. Hunger, a different kind of invader, begins to gnaw. Hope, that stubborn candle lit in Hagia Sophia, flickers lower, drowning in the smoke. Silence. Then, the flood breaks. Not water this time, but men. Fire and fury given human form. Under the sickly gray light before dawn, when exhaustion has worn the defenders to their thinnest edge, the air splits with a sound not born of this earth, the chilling, ululating war cry of the Sultan's janissaries. It rises above the memory of bombardment, a wave of pure, primal terror crashing against the battered stones. Drums thunder like frantic, monstrous hearts. Cymbals clash like the breaking of the world. And then, the tide. Thousands upon thousands. A human torrent lit by flickering torches, surging towards the wounded sections of the wall. The breach becomes a mouth of hell. Men meet in a screaming, stabbing, hacking frenzy. Steel rings on steel, bites into wood, tears through wool and flesh. The air thickens with the coppery reek of blood, the stench of voided bowels, coking smoke of Greek fire and Turkish grenades. It's not battle, it's raw butchery in a stone coffin. Leo flattens himself against cold stone, the painted wood of his icon digging into his palm. He sees the spearman Theodore drive his weapon home, sees the shock in the dying Turk's eyes. He sees the axe fall, sees Bjorn the Varangian disappear under a wave of red tunics. A scimitar flashes near him. He closes his eyes, whispering the only prayer he knows, Kyrie eleison. The tide cannot be stemmed. The iron ring is broken. The cry, the city is taken, rips through the streets like a cold wind, spreading panic, cold and absolute. People run, stumble, fall, a terrified river flowing towards the only perceived sanctuary, the vast, golden heart of Byzantium, Hagia Sophia. Inside the great church, under the dome that once seemed to hold up heaven itself, the air thrums. with terror. Thousands pressed together, their faces upturned. Not towards the mosaics of Christ's Pantocrator, but towards the massive bronze doors. The scent is overwhelming. Thick incense, sour sweat, sharp fear, the cloying sweetness of myrrh, and the underlying tang of hopelessness. Priests chant the liturgy, their voices cracking, a fragile dam against the rising tide of dread. The prayers swell, a desperate chorus. Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. Children whimper. An old woman rocks back and forth, clutching a small, painted icon of St. Demetrius to her chest. The sunlight streaming through the high windows feels suddenly accusatory, illuminating the dust of centuries stirred by their frantic footsteps. They pray for a miracle, for the walls to mend, for the Archangel Michael to descend with his flaming sword. But the sounds from outside change. The clash of steel grows nearer, sharper. Shouts in an alien guttural tongue. The heavy, rhythmic thud against the very doors of the church. The sound of axes biting into sacred wood. The prayers falter. Single, high-pitched scream cuts through the chanting. The light under the dome seems too dim, as if heaven itself is withdrawing its gaze. Heat, a physical weight pressing down, leaching the moisture from your eyes, your throat, your very thoughts. The air shimmers like molten glass, distorting the ruins that rise, mirage-like, from the ocean of sand. Look upon these bones, Tia, not shattered by cannon or swallowed by waves, but picked clean by time and indifference. This was Merv, the queen of the world, they called her. Where caravans from Cathay met traders from Baghdad under vaulted bazaars that once rang with 100 tongues, where spices perfumed the air and silk flowed like liquid wealth. Now, only the dunes pay court, lapping at her broken walls like a lazy, golden tide. The silence isn't oppressive, it's profound, empty. The silence of a stage after the players have all departed, leaving only the crumbling scenery behind. The air tastes of dust, ancient, pervasive, gritty on the tongue, and something else. The phantom scent of cinnamon and camel dung, long since baked away by centuries of unforgiving sun. This vanishing wasn't a single, brutal act. It was an unraveling, a slow, relentless letting go to step into the ghost of her grandeur. Feel the grit beneath your feet, not paving stones, but the desert patiently reclaiming its own. The scale is staggering, humbling. Arches that once framed processions of merchants and princes now frame only emptiness and the blinding, indifferent sky. Touch the wall. The brick is furnace hot, leached of color, its surface pitted and scarred by the scouring wind. Here, in this buried courtyard, a fragment of mosaic winks up a splash of stubborn blue, a curve of green that once formed a mythical bird, rising, whose skilled hands laid these tiny stones under the shade of a canopy centuries ago, whose eyes admired their brilliance as deals were struck, 4 bolts of Samarkand velvet and pearls from Hormuz. The air, thick with heat, seems to hold the echo of haggling voices, the jingle of harness bells on back-trained camels, the distant, rhythmic call to prayer from a minaret now reduced to a jagged stump. But listen closer. Only the hiss, the endless, whispering hiss of sand settling, shifting, filling the void left by departed lives. The scent of prosperity, rosewater from Persian gardens, baking flatbread, hot metal from the coppersmith's quarter, has long surrendered to the sterile, ancient smell of sun-baked earth. Grandeur bleached away, leaving only the skeleton slowly being buried. Deeper still, the intimate spaces where laughter once echoed and fires warmed the night. The silence becomes personal. Not the silence of empires, but of a single, snuffed candle. A child's toy horse, legs snapped off, lies abandoned in the corner of a room where sand formed soft dunes against the walls. Was it dropped in a moment of play? Forgotten in a hurried departure? Beside it, A wooden spindle, its whirl, smooth from a woman's touch, waits eternally for wool that will never come. Feel the dry, splintered wood beneath imagined fingers. The air here is oven still, smelling only of sun-baked clay and centuries of dust. And here, a scrap of paper, miraculously preserved. The ink is faded, but legible. Elegant curves of Arabic script, perhaps a line of poetry copied by a diligent student. The desert wind carries the sighs of the lonely ... or the record of a dead ode for a bolt of crimson silk. Ode, 5 silver dirhams, to Ali ibn Hassan for silk, due at next moon. A whisper of ordinary life, frozen in the moment before leaving. What prompted that final departure? Was it the slow death of the canals, those life-giving arteries, choked by silt and neglect, watched year after year by anxious farmers as their fields turned to dust? Was it the shifting winds of trade, the caravans finding safer, richer paths, far to the south, leaving Merv a backwater, its markets echoing emptier each season? Or was it the creeping shadow on the horizon, the rumor, then the certainty of the Mongol horde? A storm of hooves and arrows drawing nearer, making staying seem like waiting for the executioner's blade. The reasons blur, lost like the paths through the dunes. What remains are these small, silent testaments, the broken toy, the idle spindle, the unfinished thought on paper. The unraveling began with the threads of commerce, the lifeblood drying up, then the threads of community frayed as families sought water, safety, a future elsewhere. Finally, the threads of memory itself began to loosen beyond the city walls. The dead keep their vigil. Hey, necropolis, vast as the city itself, a forest of baked earth tombs and crumbling mausoleums under the immense sky. The wind, rising now with the cooling air, sighs through broken domes and empty arches, a mournful chorus across centuries. The elaborate terracotta faces adorning some tombs, once fierce guardians, serene saints watching over eternal sleep, have been scoured by the desert's breath into eerie, eyeless masks. Whose hands carved these protectors? Whose bones lie beneath this shifting sand, guarded now only by the wind and the indifferent stars? The silence here is deeper, older. It's the silence of generations who lived, loved, traded, prayed, and died believing Merv was eternal, that their monuments would stand as long as the stars burned. Their guardians stare blindly as the sand drifts over their feet, reclaiming them inch by patient inch. The city didn't fall, it faded. It's like a pattern woven into priceless silk left too long in the sun. The vibrant colors simply bleached away. The knots holding it together, trade, faith, community, water, loosened one by one until the whole magnificent tapestry dissolved into separate, meaningless threads, scattered and buried. The wind still sighs through Merv's broken arches. The water still hides Villeneuve's sorrows. The sea still claws at Skellig Michael's stones. Constantinople's echoes fade beneath new prayers. These are not just ruins. They are echoes, whispers, carried on the desert breeze, rising from the drowned depths, echoing in the hollows where faith once clung to cliffs, resonating where empire fell. They are the stark, silent testament to the fragile architecture of human endeavor. We build our monuments, villages, monasteries, cities, empires, believing in permanence. We raise walls against the sea, the enemy, the void. We etch our stories in stone and vellum. Yet the stones themselves whisper a different truth. They speak of impermanence, civilizations that shone bright as any star, then vanished, leaving only riddles etched in dust and water and silence. They remind us that all things, glory, faith, power, home, are ultimately borrowed from the relentless current of history. We walk upon forgotten worlds. We are the future's ghosts. Listen to the silence. It holds the memory of everything lost. Remember them if these lost worlds and the echoes of those who lived within them have touched you. If you feel the weight of their silence and the pull of their stories. Like this video. Subscribe to the channel. Your support is the torch that helps us continue exploring the shadows of history, bringing these vanished voices back from the brink of oblivion. Help us ensure these stories are not lost to the dunes of time.